told me that they would like for the theme of my residency to be paper art. This was both wonderful and a catastrophe. It was wonderful because paper is near and dear to my heart, as you shall see. But it was a catastrophe because I could teach an entire university course on paper art and still not even have time to cover the highlights. That is one of the reasons why I requested that a table of books be brought in that could be checked out after the talk if you're interested in learning more. You can take them home with you tonight if you have a library card. You know, and I use this residency not just as an opportunity to teach others about paper art, but as a chance to learn even more myself. So some of the techniques on display, such as the origami crane or the layered paper cuts, were entirely new to me. In the end, it was decided that I would demonstrate two aspects of paper art: origami and the Japanese stab binding method of bookbinding. I said earlier that paper is near and dear to me, and so before I begin the actual folding, I have a bit more yammering on to do. So some people have mantras for positivity, things like, I love myself, or I'm perfect just the way I am. But none of those, and believe me, I once read through a list of over 50 different ones. None of them ever seemed to resonate with me. It seemed like if I tried saying such things to myself, like I was just lying to myself, and I ended up feeling worse if I tried. But someone once encouraged me to try and create my own mantra, something I could actually believe might possibly be true. And it took me a long time to come up with one, but I eventually did. And my mantra became, I am as good as paper. This might not sound like much, it sounds humble, but if you think about it, paper is amazing. You can do so much with paper. You can make beautiful, useful, astonishing things with paper, but only if you work with the paper. All paper has flaws. Corners are not exactly 90 degrees. They might be really close, like 89.9 degrees. And if you buy special origami paper, the manufacturers might have even higher standards. And so the angle might be something like 89.999 degrees. But it will never be exactly perfectly square. And that's okay. As long as you acknowledge it and work with it instead of fighting against it, you can fold great things. Paper is never perfectly flat either. In fact, it is not flat in several different ways. If you view paper under a microscope, you'll see that the surface has tiny bumps, ridges, scales, and wrinkles, textural irregularities of all kinds. This is what I call being not smooth. If you were to measure the thickness of a piece of paper at different points with a precision micrometer, you would find that the paper is a little thicker in some places than others. This is what I call being not even. Another imperfection of paper is that it's not a perfect mathematical plane. It has some curvature. All paper will have some slight depressions or bulges or possibly some ripples. And this is what I'm referring to when I'm saying that paper is not flat. Some people think that you can make paper more flat by pounding on it with like a mallet, but this doesn't work at all. And to understand why not, we're going to go on a bit of a digression to talk about how paper is made. To make paper, first you make pulp. Most commonly today, this is done with pulverized wood, but before the 1840s, it was made from macerated rags of fibers are used. They're processed by being cooked in an alkaline solution to break down cell walls. Sometimes other chemicals are added at this stage, such as bleach for whiteness. You can make paper at home without chemicals by creating your pulp out of recycled shredded paper, or even collecting dryer lint. Then you add water and put it in a blender. Next, the step is that the pulp is diluted further. This just means more water is added. And then the diluted pulp is put in a big tub. This is not big, but it is the tub for our demonstration here. And then you have a screen of flat, thin mesh. Usually it's wire, and it has a frame on it, and you dip it into the tub and submerge it. And when you lift it up, there will be a thin layer of pulp coating the surface of the screen. So you squeeze out some of the excess water, and then you remove the paper from the screen. While the paper is still damp, after it's been removed from the screen but still damp, that's when it can be shaped. And usually the way we shape it is to try and make it more flat. There are various things you can do to make it more flat at this stage. If you're a large paper mill, you run it through a series of metal rollers. If you're a home paper maker, you can place your damp sheet on a very smooth surface such as glass and roll over it with a brayer. If you don't know what a brayer is, it's like an artist's rolling pin. You also can flatten it by creating sandwiches of a waterproof board, a sheet of cardboard, paper towels, your damp sheet of paper, paper towels, cardboard, waterproof board, and make as many layers as you need for however many sheets of paper you're making. Then put bricks on top. And then you can accelerate the drying process by putting just a regular circular fan pointed towards the side of the stack. You can even dry your paper just by hanging it on a clothesline. That won't help you make it more flat, but it's one way to make it dry. And once the paper is dry, it's set. So how does this help us understand why you can't pound paper flat like a mallet? So usually a flat screen is used to make paper. But you could use a screen that was shaped like a hemisphere, like this kitchen strainer here. Imagine paper made on this screen. When it's still damp, you could remove it from the screen and you could mush it. And you could make it more flat by mushing it. But imagine you let it dry on the screen and you remove it and it's completely dry. And you try to flatten it by just pounding on it. It's not really gonna be more flat. You're just gonna crush it, crumple it, weaken its structure, possibly even rip it. And the same sort of thing would happen to mostly flat paper on a more microscopic scale if you try to force it to be flat by pounding on it. You won't actually make it flatter, you'll just make it a little weaker. But going back to this theoretical bowl-shaped piece of paper, you would have to admit that it has some limitations. It cannot become an origami model that was designed for a flat, square sheet of paper. But you could design an origami model specifically meant to be folded from a hemispherical sheet of paper. You could use it to make something not only beautiful and amazing, but something that couldn't be made from regular flat paper. So you see, paper can be a metaphor for people. If you try to force them to become something they are not and cannot be, you only end up hurting them. If you ignore their imperfections and pretend they don't exist, you'll run into way more problems dealing with these people than if you would if you acknowledge their real qualities, good and bad, and try to accommodate them as needed. About paper, I say get to know it, accept it, work with it, respect it. And this can apply equally well to people just by changing the pronoun. Get to know them, accept them, work with them, respect them. So now let me show you how I put this attitude into practice with some actual folding. Most origami is made from square pieces of paper. Not all, but most. And the model that I was going to be making for you today is no exception. It's modular origami, which means it's made from 3 different pieces of square paper, which will be assembled at the end. But the pieces are square. So why did I bring in just a regular piece of printer paper? Because I wanted to show you how you can make a square from just a regular piece of printer paper, because not everybody has square paper at home. So what you're going to want to do is take the short edge and fold it to the flat, or to the long edge. You're going to want to be careful at the corner here to try and get the corner lined up just right. You might want to actually hold it up and pinch the corner, and then fold it so that this edge and this edge are lined up. Some people use what's called a bone folder when they're folding origami. It helps make the creases just more, it's like using your fingernail to really make the crease folded strongly. I'm not going to be using one today. I don't usually use one unless I'm folding with especially thick paper. With thicker paper, you may need a bone folder to really make those creases, stay flat or whatever. Anyway, now that we've folded one side to the other with this sheet of printer paper, we're going to remove this excess strip here, and then we'll have a square. So first you might want to fold that excess strip over top, right along the edge of where this line is. And you're going to want to fold this, since we're going to be tearing it, you're going to want to fold it several times back and forth. So you're going to want to fold it in the other direction, really get it good with your fingernails or with a bone folder. You can open it up at this point to help you kind of fold it. And then here's a tip to make it tear easier. You lick it. You could also get it damp some other way, but it's easiest to just lick it, I find. I've never gotten a paper cut on my tongue from it. Anyway, so now that we have our fold that's been made back and forth several times and dampened, it should tear fairly easily. You'll notice I made just a tiny tear at the corner, and now I'm going to pull the sides apart. So that's pretty even. So now we're going to talk about how to make a module. You're first going to fold it in half one way, And you just want to line up the edges and the corners, and then hold them in place with one hand and fold the crease with the other. Next, you're going to want to fold each side edge into the center. And here's where some of my attitude about working with paper and its imperfections comes into play, because you are not, when you're assembling the modules, you're going to be sticking the end of one inside the end of another. And so it would be nice if one end were a little thinner than the other end, so you could stick the thinner end into the wider end. So I'm actually going to also, paper isn't infinitely thin, obviously. A lot of origami patterns kind of pretend that it is. So when they tell you to fold to the center, I usually don't fold to the center. I fold maybe a millimeter away from the center. For this one, I'm going to fold at the bottom here. I'm going to fold about a millimeter away from the side, but at the top here, I'm going to fold maybe 2 or 3 millimeters away. So that way, when we're assembling, it'll be easier. And I'm doing the same thing here. So this side, which is the thinner side, I'm folding about a millimeter away from that center line, just getting the crease in, and then placing this other side 2 to 3 millimeters away from the center line, folding the crease. We're going to want to fold in half. Again, first we open it up. Now we're folding it in half the other way. Again, just lining up the edges and corners. Folding. Now we're folding these back into place. Now what we're going to do is we're going to fold an X inside each one of these 4 rectangles. We're going to start at the very center point here, where the two, from folding it in half one way and folding it in half the other, there's a point that's the exact center of the piece of paper. We're going to put a finger there, because that should also be, in theory, the corners of these 2 rectangles here. And we want to fold from that corner to this corner. And I'm going to flip it over. And I don't know if you can see this very well because it's white on white, but you'll see this rectangle here. Again, the corner should be right at the center here. You want to hold that, and you want to fold from there to this corner here. I'm doing this as 2 separate folds rather than one long fold like this because, again, paper isn't perfectly shaped, so they might not actually be one perfectly flat fold, but it will help your model come together better if you fold the 2 halves separately, so that each of them can be precise even if you can't get the entire thing to lay perfectly flat. I'm going to repeat that with the other side. Holding down at the center, folding to the corner, creasing, flipping over, now we just have 4 more folds to make, and then we want to go from the corner of each rectangle to the opposite corner to form. So you can see it, well, it's It's a little hard to see because it's white on white, but there's an X there.
It does show up pretty well from back here.
Okay. And then I'm going to make an X here, an X here, and an X here. And that's all there is to folding a module. Now you fold 3 of those. For the sake of time, I folded 2 in advance. So now I'll show you how to assemble them. You're going to want to take the thinner edge and put it inside the wider edge of one of your sheets of paper here. I'll put it in the blue one, I guess. And you want to have it in so that it's halfway inside, so that the edge of this paper lines up with the center fold in here. And then I'll put the thinner end of the green inside the wider end of the white. Again, sliding it so that the end of the green paper is pretty much aligned with the middle crease in the white. And now we're going to fold along all these center creases, because we're going to put the blue inside the green. This is the tricky part, kind of, or at least one of the tricky parts. You might want to open up the flaps a little to help you. And you stick the blue, I'll show you kind of sideways what I'm doing here. We're sticking this inside of this flap, and then we're just gently trying to push it so that the end of the blue sheet goes all the way down, as far down as it can. This takes a bit of patience, and you're not going to get it perfect. Again, this goes with my theory here, is you're not looking for absolute perfection. This origami model will work and look beautiful even if you don't get the blue paper perfectly all the way inside the green paper. I do think I want it in a little further. So I'm gonna actually try putting it into the green. Some are easier to slide into than others, and so I'm going to try and slide the green into the white. That one seems to slide maybe a little easier. Let's see here. Come on. And that's close enough. It's not all the way in there, but it'll still work. So now we have, on each side we have a triangle at the top and the bottom. We're going to go around the model and kind of push these inwards, while at the same time we kind of try and go from the inside and push the diamond shape in the middle of each side outwards. I always say that the assembly process of this particular model is you kind of have to massage it. You
just kind of have to keep poking around until it seems good. Then you're going to want to take what will be the top and bottom of a point, and you're going to want to fold those in so that they meet each other. Don't worry if the model's not looking so great right now, because we're in the process of assembling it, and we're look, it's all crinkled up here, but that's all right. We can fix that as we go. Fold these two in. See, and now it's starting to look a little bit better. Starting to look a little bit more like the shape we want. And now you're going to start playing with it, actually, because that is what, the more you play with it, the more it becomes, the more the creases fold into the shape that they're supposed to be. It's like you are, so the more you play with it, and you can fold it in on itself infinitely, or you can go what I call backwards mode, fold it this way. Some people say, oh no, I broke it because I popped a thing out. No, you didn't break it. That can be fixed real easy. This be fixed real easy. But essentially, at this stage of having made, you've essentially made your origami. It's called a rotating tetrahedron. It's actually a rotating string of tetrahedra. But when I learned to make it, the person teaching me called it a rotating tetrahedron. So at this point, it's essentially done. You play. The more you play with it, the more it will conform to the shape it's supposed to be. And so that is my origami demonstration. And next we're going to move on to stab binding, just to show you some of the range of different fancy options that you can do with Japanese stab binding. And this one has orange sheets of paper on the inside, so you don't have to use blank white paper. You don't, and the covers of this are made with cork, so you can be pretty creative with this stuff. And there are lots of patterns out there on the internet. You can make very beautiful designs. I'll be showing you the 4-hole design, very simple, but all the techniques of making it will apply to the more complicated one. First, let's talk about the materials you're going to need for Japanese stab binding. You'll need paper for the pages. All the pieces of paper should be the same height, and the edge where the spine will be sewn needs to be blank, or else if there's imagery or text under that part of the spine where it's going to be shown, be aware that you won't be able to see it when you open the book to read it, because part of the page gets sewn through and becomes part of the spine. In European book binding, pages are folded into signatures and they're not a part of the spine. But in Japanese stab binding, the pages are part of the spine. So if you're not doing a blank book, you'd want to make sure that you leave a wide enough margin if there's text on the page or something. Now, material for covers. Traditionally, Japanese stab-bound books are not hard covers. With Japanese stab binding, you can make hard covers as long as you create hinges on both covers, but we won't be getting into that today. You can sign up on the sign-up sheet if you want further information about that, or even just reminders of the information I give you here today about Japanese stab binding. So you're going to want covers that are relatively thin and sturdy but flexible. Typically thick cardstock is used, but in the past I've used rolled cork, as in one of the journals that was passed around. I've even made my own covers out of measuring tapes. You can use sheets of craft foam that you can get at the craft store, and if you use waterproof paper, which you can get at the craft store located near alcohol inks, it's sometimes called Yupo paper. And if you have waterproof paper and the foam covers, you can make a nice little book for bath time for reading to your little ones. So cover materials, you can choose various things as long as it's fairly strong, thin, and flexible. You're going to want to cut the covers so that it's pretty much about exactly the same height as your pages. It can be just a tiny bit taller if needed, and you want it to be just a little bit wider than your widest page if you're using different widths of pages. Maybe just like 1/8 of an inch wider. To do that, you're going to probably need a ruler, a pencil, and either scissors or an X-Acto or craft knife combined with a self-healing cutting mat and metal straight edge. Anyway, that's just for, you know how to cut paper into this, you measure the size you need, you cut it. Next, you're going to need some clips because you want to hold the pages and the covers all in good alignment while you work on the book. I really like these. These are designed, you get them at the grocery store to hold chip bags together. But they have these really nice, I don't know if you can see, rubber grippy things on the inside so they can grip the cover nice and tightly and yet not leave an indentation in the cover. If you use binder clips to hold your paper and your covers in alignment, there is a chance that it could, if it's too tight, it could leave an indentation in the cover. You'll also need a drill. A drill press is the best option, but a hand drill can be used too. The results will just be a little less precise. A lot of manuals and books and tutorials will tell you that you can use an awl for making the holes. But unless you're Hercules or you only have 2 pages in your book, I really don't see how this can work out, because an awl is essentially just a needle attached to a stick. It's not going to go all the way through. Along with your drill, you'll need appropriately sized drill bits. The right size to use will depend on how thick your sewing material is, but I've found that generally somewhere between 2 to 2.5 millimeters often works well. You're also going to need scrap wood because you don't want to accidentally drill into the surface of your table. Important. So as to your sewing material, like absolutely ideal if you can get hemp cord that is either 0.6 or 0.8 millimeters in thickness. That is like superb. But today I'm going to be sewing with some polyester cording. It's not ideal, but it's what I found for a reasonable price without having to search too hard. You can also buy wax if you're using a plant-based cording that isn't already waxed, to wax it. You use it, it comes like this, and you use it by slotting the thread through one of these holes, sinking it into the round of wax, which I can't really do because this is 15 years old and the wax is totally dried out and crumbly. But you'd sink the thread into the wax and then pull it through, and that would get wax along the cord. Why would you want waxed cord? Because it holds to the paper tighter. It holds to itself tighter. But the wax, really not essential. I wouldn't have even mentioned it if we were really low on time. You're going to want a needle that is blunt tipped and has an eye that's large enough that you can fit your cording through it. You may need a needle threader too. They come in different styles. They just help you get the cord through the eye of the needle if you need some help with that. And of course you're going to need scissors to cut the cord. So, you also can use, as I've used in this book here, 1/8 inch wide ribbon, and you definitely don't want to wax that. So are we ready? Well, not quite yet, because we still need a pattern. Today I'm going to demonstrate the most basic pattern of all, the classic 4-hole bind. But even a pattern as simple as that, you need to mark out with like a ruler and a pencil. I like these clear rulers because I can just line up this edge along the side of the spine edge of my cover, and all of the holes that I mark will be the same distance from the spine. You'll mark one like 1/2 inch from the top, one 1/2 inch from the bottom, and then the other two should be equally spaced, so you use some math there, you mark them. For more complicated patterns, like some of those books I showed you earlier and got passed around, a lot of times on the internet you can find patterns that you can print out onto a sheet of paper, and they have dots where you should drill through. This would be the pattern for the bind I'm doing today, just 4 holes. But you'd print it out to the right size so that it is the same size as your spine, and then you would attach it to the cover using, I really love these Scotch restickable clear mini tabs. You just want to make sure that you put the tabs somewhere where they're not directly behind one of the dots, because you don't want to be drilling through them. So you would attach that to a cover. So now we're ready to start talking about the process. So you've marked or attached a pattern to a cover. You've got your pages in a stack, and then you put the other cover on the other side, and then you align them by, just tapping them on the table. until they're all kind of aligned. And then you put the binder clips on, or the chip clips on, to keep everything aligned while you work. If things slip out of alignment while you're putting the clips on, that's okay. Just go tap it again, realign them again, try putting the clips on again. So once you've got your what's called the book block here all clipped up and ready to work on, you're going to want to thread your needle. Well, first of all, how long should you cut your thread? They usually tell you in the pattern. And this pattern, the 4-hole bind, says to cut the thread 7 times the length of the spine. So I'm going to just wrap it around here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay, come on, thread, 6, and 7, and then a little bit extra, because you'd always rather have too much than too little. So I'm going to pull some extra out here. So now we thread our needle. And you might expect that you'd start sewing at one end of the spine and work your way to the other end. But this isn't how Japanese binding works. You actually start stitching upwards from the second hole. If you wanted to get really fancy, there's a way to hide the ends of the thread by starting stitching from the inside of the book. But that's a little more advanced. So I'm just going to do this the regular way. I'm going to start from the bottom, in the second hole here, and pull the thread most of the way through, but leave a little tail at the end. You don't want to pull it all the way through. Now you're going to wrap it around the spine edge and come back up through the same hole that you just went up before. And you want to get that kind of aligned so that it's perpendicular to the spine there. Pull it tight. Now you're going to want to go down hole 3. And from underneath, you're going to wrap it around that spine edge again. And go down hole 3 again. Again, pull it tight. Now you're going to want to go up hole 4. Again, around the spine edge and back up. But now we're going to go around this side edge, which is actually going to be the bottom edge of the book. And then back up through the same hole. You're going to want to make sure the thread is fairly perpendicular to the side there. And now we're going to be sewing across we're going to be sewing the opposite of what we sewed before. So before we sewed on the underside between these two holes. Now we're going to be sewing the top side between these two holes. Pull it tight, and before we stitch the top between these two holes, now we're going to be stitching the bottom between those two holes so that the covers look the same on the front and the back. Now we're going to go down the last or first hole, depending on your point of view. Going to go around the spine again. And we're going to go around the side again as well. And then next, we're going to go up hole 2. Oops, well, this. Let's see if I can get that. Anyway, we were going to want to take, so I'm going to try and get it through this thread again and go back down that hole so that our thread ends where it begins. And I just broke the needle. Well, we are going to then keep the thread on this side of the book. I will have to safely dispose of these broken needle bits at the end. And so this one's a little wonky, but so I'll just tie them together in the back here. Normally you'd be tying them from the same spot, and if you were using waxed plant fiber thread, the knot, if you just do a double or triple knot, it would hold and pull it real tight. It would hold together so well that if you trimmed the threads off so there were like no thread ends at all, you really wouldn't even have to worry about the knot unraveling. And then you could use like a toothpick or something, or maybe a blunt-ended needle, and kind of push the knot into that hole so it would be kind of hidden and the stitching would look all smooth and nice. If you're using a thread more like the polyester, you can use glue on your knot, and only some people will consider that cheating. I didn't bring glue tonight because we don't have time to wait for glue to dry so that on a knot so that I could cut the ends off and show you how to poke it into a hole. So I was just planning on tying a bow, which some people actually do on purpose because they like the decorative effect. So we're just going to tie this in a bow here and cut off the extra thread. And now we can take the clips off and we have a book. Isn't that pretty amazing, eh? Honestly, I'm a bit in awe of paper. Paper changed the world. Widespread literacy would probably never have been possible just by the Gutenberg printing press alone. if paper hadn't presented itself as a less costly and mass-producible alternative to parchment, which was made from sheep or goat skin, or vellum made from calf skin, we would not be here today in a library, a whole building devoted to books accessible for free. Libraries would probably never have been possible without paper because books would have remained very costly items accessible only to the rich. Truly, paper has changed the entire world. And thank you all again for coming in tonight despite the weather to learn a little bit more about this amazing material.